You're listening to the Cars of Carlisle Network, podcast episode number 108, featuring Candy Clark from the movie American Graffiti.
Cars of Carlisle is your favorite internationally downloaded podcast about all things automotive. Darren and his CFC team are ever searching for interesting automotive happenings, real stories about real car people, and fun features to inform and entertain you. Each week, the Cars of Carlisle crew brings you show topics ranging from car shows to team adventures to auto racing weekends to behind-the-scenes human interest stories from car nuts that live across town, across the country, or even across the globe. Come join the road trip.
Today, meet Hollywood actress Candy Clark, a key cast member in a memorable car movie franchise. Join in as we speak with Ms. Clark, who earned a nomination for Best Supporting Actress in her role as Debbie in the 1973 classic American Graffiti, and later teamed up with fellow cast members in the sequel, More American Graffiti. In the original film, Candy's character rides around with Toad in the 1958 Chevy Impala. To this day, Candy knows cars, as she kept tabs on those iconic vehicles that co-starred with her back in 1973. It's time to drift back in time to that fictitious night in Southern California, when a group of teenagers in the age of jukebox rock and roll experienced music, pranks, cruising, drag racing, and life decisions. So, let's get revved up!
Hello and welcome back, Cubers, to your favorite informative automotive podcast. I am your trusted host, Darren. This is episode 108, and we get a chance to speak with Hollywood actress Candy Clark. I'm really excited for you guys to listen in today. We're going to hear her stories about filming this seminal car movie, American Graffiti. Candy has been in a plethora of films, like The Man Who Fell to Earth with David Bowie and Zodiac. In fact, she was in one of my favorite action movies, not automotive related in this particular case, but another area or subject I like, and that's aviation. And that was Blue Thunder back in 1983, where she played the role of Kate. I'd like to say thank you to Mike Garland for making the introduction to Candy, and I sincerely appreciate all of our friends at Carlisle Events. And I'd also like to send a special shout out to the entire team at Porsche Mechanicsburg. But before we speak with Miss Clark in California, let's not forget about how we can help those less fortunate than ourselves through the Courage virtual car show that has already launched. And I know that we're all ready to go with the car show season, but as this sheltering starts to wane a little bit, we're still spending more time at home than not. Why not get involved with this Courage car show? It's an online car show, and that stands for Car Owners United Rallying Against Global Epidemics. So with that, every single dollar and cent raised in both donations and registration fees are all going directly to Feeding America. Not one bit of that stays anywhere, but going 100% to Feeding America. And to get rolling, you can go to our website, carsofcarlisle.com, click on the virtual car show or that license plate you see in the upper left corner of the main page, hit the ignition switch. You can go to the virtual car show field. Be sure to register 1, 2, 3, all of your cars if you want. We'll have judging on Saturday, June 13th at 9 a.m. And we're working right now with other committee members to secure the prizes, the celebrity judges and such. So really great cause, all of it going to support Feeding America, and we'd love to have you be part of that. So how about some trivia? I have to tell you, I am truly a shoebox Chevy fan, and someday I would love to have a heavily modded 55 210 in my garage, but that would be to really scratch the hot rod itch that I have had for many years now. But so really, it's only natural that I picked the all-business black 55 Chevy from American Graffiti to base this week's trivia question on that. So here we go. Question is, what engine and tranny were in the 55 in American Graffiti, the car that Harrison Ford's character drove around town and then later at the end of the movie was featured in the street race? That answer at the end of the show. So for now, let's go talk to our friend Candy Clark in California. Cubers, this is Darren, and I am on the phone with Candy Clark. And Candy Clark, thank you so much for being here. You are giving up your morning on the West Coast.
Oh, I'm giving it up? No, it's my pleasure to be here. Yes, my name is Candy Clark. I was in the movie American Graffiti, and that's what we're going to talk about today, right?
Yes, we are. In fact, we might even dabble into the 1979 sequel. But yeah, let's definitely start with the original one that got it all kicked off. And I think many of my listeners, or all of my listeners, probably have seen the movie. If you're a car fan of any sort, you know that it is heralded as one of the best car movies, and the fact that it really captures at least George Lucas's perspective of what it was like growing up in California. The movie being set in Modesto, California, in August of '62. For those that haven't heard or seen the movie, it's really about a group of friends that are getting together for this one last night as summer vacation ends. Some are going back to high school, some are going off to college. Two of the characters, one of which we really have, they're going back east, if you will, to college, and there's some decisions to be made, and a lot of things that happen in that. And Ron Howard and Richard Dreyfuss happen to be the two cast members that are talking about going back east. Is that a good synopsis,
okay.
Candy?
Well, I think most people have seen it at least once. It came out in 1973, and if you're a car guy and that's your audience, most car guys have seen this movie because it's full of cars, vintage cars. Back then, those cars were not vintage. They were just kind of used. Mm-hmm. And because we shot it in 72, and 1962, which is Where Were You in 62, is the logo of the movie, was only 10 years prior. But by the time the 70s had come, everything had changed, and those old cars were kind of passé, and the Pinto was hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cars of the 70s, and I really never liked the cars of the 70s. They were kind of no frills, no chrome, just very basic and to me cheap looking. The cars from the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and even the 30s, and even the old Model T is much better made cars with real steel and less plastic, and so it was kind of the film is basically about the end of an era, because the world changed pretty quickly after that with the Kennedy assassination and the Vietnam War, and so it's a film about simpler times when everyone, people weren't walking around with a gun in their pocket. The most you had was a little pocket knife, and it was just a lot of people think it was a better time.
Well, sure, and that's understandable. In fact, when you were getting ready for your character, I mean, it obviously everybody knows that you were Debbie Dunham in the movie. Did you draw from your growing up and your earlier teen years in the Midwest?
Well, that little did we know, but cruising and that way to meet people was going on all across the USA, except maybe the East Coast, New York, where people rode the public transportation. But in Texas, where I grew up, that was, something that was done almost every night. And we had two drive-ins that everyone would go to. One was called Carlson's, and that was on one side of town, and then everyone would drive over to the Lone Star Drive-In, and then they would hang out there a little bit, and then go back to Carlson's, and around, and you'd make the circuit, all night. Back then, gas was cheap, and, it was a way to find out what was going on, meet people, and it was a lot of fun. It really was.
And I do remember we had in my high school years were here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and there was, and I know you're familiar with Carlisle, just the circuit, which was around several blocks, and that they actually they banned it. It was a law passed.
Yeah, it really kind of blocked business. A lot of places, you couldn't get to if you really needed to go to the grocery store or something.
Sure.
You had to wait in line and then finally pull off into your grocery store. But, we, at that time, we weren't even thinking about blocking businesses' driveways. And,
right.
there were, and then finally, I guess the shop owners and the people that couldn't get any business finally had enough of it and spoke to the mayor. And anyway, it kind of died all across the U.S., the cruising thing.
Well, what was it like running around? Obviously, you were in one of the most iconic vehicles, and it was the car that was owned by Steve, and then Terry, who was your interest in the movie, was to...
Well, he had a little money.
Right. So, I know he nicknamed Toad, and then he introduced himself to you when he pulled along the sidewalk and said that his name was Tiger. I thought it was kind of fun how to your character he had went through a whole litany of things like Buenos noches, do you need a lift somewhere? Hey, do you know John Milner? He's a good friend of mine. Did anyone ever tell you that you look like Connie Stevens? I met her at the Dick Clark
And
Roadshow.
then that pulled me in.
Yes, exactly.
And I said, really? I thought I looked like Sandra Dee.
Exactly.
And then he said, yeah, you look like her too.
Right.
Anything to be agreeable, know?
Right, yeah.
So,
and then I think it was great too. My dad had a rod with tuck and roll, so when you said bitch and tuck and roll and can you lay rubber, and that was it, so... The character got in.
And then I said, peel out.
That's right.
And then he attempted it. He got a couple of little squeaks out of the tire. And that was it.
Well, what was it?
But yeah, Toad, Debbie was very nice to Toad, ultimately, in the end. And she reiterated the evening, and it was all very positive, including, watching him throw up.
Right, exactly. Yep, everybody's heart went out to him on that one. And then he had, of course, the adults standing by, just shaking their head in disbelief, like, "Yep, so she's right."
And then that one lady says to her husband, "Hey, looks like a dog, doesn't he?"
You're right. Right.
He looks like old Ginger.
That's right.
Anyway, the dialogue in that film was so good. Gloria and Willard Hayek were a husband and wife team, and they wrote that film, but they just had the best dialogue, and every character had funny things to say. So, even, Mackenzie Phillips, the things she would say to Big John Milner, and I guess the most dramatic roles were Cindy and Ron Howard. They were kind of breaking up that evening.
Right, sure.
But
yeah.
But they got back together.
That's right, and continued on into the next movie.
They did.
Yeah, husband and wife too. What was it like? I mean, obviously the '55 Chevy that Harrison Ford drove as Falfa. The 32 Deuce that Milner was sweeping up everybody in the whole valley with he was the drag racing king per se. But what was it like being in that '58 Impala for the filming? Was it fun?
Well, it wasn't anything special, I tell you.
Okay.
Most of these cars barely drove.
Okay.
You must remember this was a very low budget film.
Yeah, I think it was under $800,000, right?
Yes, and that included 41 songs and the editing and the script and paying the actors, and so that you can't even buy a house in L.A. for $850,000. So if you look at it that way, it was very, very low budget. We didn't have all the fineries that films have, the higher budget. If you wanted to rest, you had to sit on the curb or just sit in the car. We didn't have chairs. We didn't really have a makeup department. It was all in a trailer that had all the wardrobe plus the makeup department, and You know, it was very low budget. And it was really cold. We shot it up in Petaluma, California.
Okay.
We started out in San Rafael, and then one guy complained, a guy that owned a bar, that we were blocking his business. And so we moved from San Rafael. I think we stayed, our hotel rooms, we stayed in San Rafael at a Holiday Inn, but we started shooting in the town called Petaluma. And now Petaluma has a huge hot rod show every year in mid-May where they recreate American Graffiti. It's like Mecca for American Graffiti. Petaluma is.
Yes.
And but what was the point? What was the question?
we were just talking about running. What it was like riding that '58 Impala?
And in the cars. Well, like I said, they were nothing special. They were being pulled around. By the camera truck because they really weren't very drivable. They were all very used cars and beat up, and they photographed great. You couldn't tell, but and they were later sold back through Hemmings News. Our car wrangler guy put them up for sale because nobody wanted them. And people bought the white 58. This one guy bought it for like $400, $450, and it was his drive-to-school car. And the yellow hot rod sold to someone for $1,500, and then I think that guy flipped it for $15,000 in Wichita, Kansas. And then the current owner, Rick Fagari, still owns it and got it. It's probably priceless at this point.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So the 55, someone bought that, and then they completely restored it and made it, their own with a paint job and everything. So that car has totally changed. And the Merc wound up in the East Coast, sitting behind
that was the Pharaoh's car, right?
Yeah, the Pharaoh car, and it's been sitting outside for probably 35 years. The whole top is. I saw pictures of it a few years ago. Someone went there and photographed it over the fence. The top is all delaminated, and because it was chopped and kind of done with Bondo and stuff,
right.
And it's all ruined. Someone didn't value it as a movie car, so it's a complete restoration. It's ruined basically.
Wow.
But the yellow hot rod is in tip-top shape. And so is the white 58. Ray Everham, the guy that bought it initially for $400, sold it a few years ago at auction at Profiles in History, and Ray Everham wound up buying it. It's the owner started off with the first bid at $1 million, and of course no one bid because there's really nowhere where to go in the bidding.
Sure.
So Ray waited till the auction was over and contacted the owner and got the car and completely did a restoration on it and polished it up, gave it a new paint job, and it looks better than it ever did in its life. I think it looks better than it came off the assembly line.
I'm sure of that.
But he's really proud of it, and he had pursued it since the movie had come out, and he couldn't get it, so finally he did.
Good. That is a great story. Well, I don't know if I was looking too to see what happened with the '56 T-Bird. If that's...
Oh, I know what happened with that. The original owners, May and Clay, that was their names, married couple, owned that car, and they owned it and drove it up to Petaluma many, many times and displayed it. And they would drive it from the L.A. area all the way up to Petaluma. And it would about kill them because the air conditioning didn't work, and and it was a very uncomfortable car.
Okay.
But anyway, they wound up selling it finally to a guy up in Petaluma, and he owns it now.
Oh,
I don't know if he drives it or much, but, you know, it was kind of getting a little tired out from being used as a daily car.
Oh, sure. Well, at least it's now home, essentially, in the
it's back in Petaluma.
Yeah.
But May and Clay Daly owned it. They rented it for the movie and for Suzanne Somers. And Suzanne Somers has said in interviews that they were very fussy about her sitting in the car, driving the car. They were really worried about it. And back then it was somewhat new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When we shot the film.
I can see that.
And so, but they owned it outright all the way up until recently.
Wow.
When they sold it.
That's a pretty good, cool provenance that it's been with them for so many years.
Yeah, the original owners, and now it's got a new owner.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about, I know I'm using a broad brushstroke here, but the different scenes, particularly with Toad. I mean, there was the liquor store, then the canal. I laughed when I watched the movie again last night about the goat killer, and then you hear the goat, braying in the background and all that. What? How many different nights did it take to do all the filming? Because obviously, for those that haven't seen the movie,
originally scheduled for 28 nights.
Okay.
We did cheat on the goat killer scene because there was just no way to light out in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, it was a low-budget film. So to hire and use a big generator is very costly. So we shot that scene day for night. And then that means they put a lens on the camera, a dark lens, so it appears to be nighttime.
How about that?
But it's really daytime. So we were doing this scene and crouching around and acting like we were out in the woods in broad daylight. And then Toad and I are making out. It's broad daylight.
Yeah,
it would have been better if it were nighttime, but, So anyway, that's how that was done. And that's the one real cheat. The rest of the time, we were actually shooting at night. And we would get picked up for work about 4:30, and then by the time we'd get to the location, it would, and get our makeup on and my wig on and everything else and get dressed, we'd start shooting at, start getting dark. And we shot the film, I think it was in May, and so it took a while to get dark, but we shot it up in the Bay Area. Mel's Drive-In was in San Francisco,
okay,
on a street called Van Ness and Mission. And it was very near the freeway. And that got knocked down. That lot got... The Mel's Drive-In was to be sold. It was an empty drive-in. It still had all its stuff in and the equipment and the menus and everything, but it was up for sale, and they weren't using it as a drive-in. It was up for sale. And then that lot got sold. They knocked down Mel's. And then I went back many, many years later to see it, and it was a parking lot. And then I went back again years later, and it was a parking lot with a bank on it. I don't know what it is now. I haven't been back in a long, long time. But the original location of Mel's was on Mission and Van Ness. So if anyone goes by and takes a look, maybe they'll tell us what's there. But, it was... we shot all night. We'd get kind of finally driven back home about 6 in the morning and just try to sleep at the Holiday Inn during the day, which is next to impossible. And because, the rest of the world that stayed at the Holiday Inn had no idea that actors were trying to sleep. So, they were banging, slamming their car doors and splashing in the pool and talking loud. And so it was really, really difficult to get any rest. Yeah.
What were there other scenes? Like obviously we had there was the liquor store scene of where Toad strikes out once or twice in order to try and
and then he comes and asks me for money.
Right, you get that crumpled dollar out of your change purse and
that really ticked me up and ticked me off. And you know what? He never paid me back. So with penalties and interest, he owes me about $30,000 by now.
I would think so.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm still upset about that.
I can see that. I can hear it. Well, the fight scene's fun too, where Milner stops by to help out, and that's. It really.
He's trying to hotwire the car.
Yeah.
We've been walking through the fields and everything, and we finally discover the car, and the bad guys Toad is trying to hotwire it and get it back.
He's always so cordial. Like, hi, this is my car, and I'm just trying to get it started again.
And the guy that beats him up is Johnny Weissmuller Jr.
Okay.
Tarzan's son. And then, of course, Big John Milner is driving by and saves the day.
Yeah, for sure. I like what you had said.
Beats up Johnny Weissmuller's son.
I like what you talked about at the beginning of this conversation where Debbie really was kind because she was well above Toad's league and what have you. But at the end, he talks about the ride home on the Vespa, and Debbie says, "Well, I like motorcycles, and that's close enough." But she just basically wraps up the whole night. Hey, I had a great time. We got to do this. We did this. We did this. I got to see this. I think that was a pretty fun time. So. It was clever.
Well, it was an adventure, Toad was a beginner, really. Mm-hmm. He he'd never had anything to drink before because, he and I shared a pint, and I assume Debbie drank most of it, and the little bit he had kind of poisoned his system, and he threw up, and
bit of a lightweight.
He was. I think Toad was younger than Debbie, mm-hmm. And then she said at the end, "Well, if I'm not busy, give me a call, okay?" Right. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very fun.
You assume that she's always going to be busy.
Right, exactly. Well, you were, let's see, I'm guessing, doing math-wise, you were about 25 when you started filming?
Perhaps.
Okay. So, how were you cast for American Graffiti? Can you tell a little bit about that?
I auditioned for it, okay. And lo and behold, I went in to meet George Lucas, and I hadn't read the script. I had heard that it took place in the 50s, mm-hmm. And so I thought, and I never was very good at auditions. I always kind of froze up. Anyway, this audition, I thought, well, I'll dress up like a character in the 1950s, and I had on my jeans rolled up and some saddle Oxford shoes and a Letterman sweater and a ring on a chain like I was going steady, and my hair pulled back in a ponytail. And I went back in, and I was sitting in the lobby of this very small casting office, and I noticed the other actors trying out are just dressed normally, and I'm the only one in costume. Mm-hmm. So I was embarrassed to start with, and then I finally get my name called. I go in, and there's George Lucas, and he's sitting behind a desk, and the desk almost takes up the whole room. Oh, wow. And so I kind of slide in, and my back's pretty much against the wall, and George has always been a very quiet person, basically an introvert, so he didn't have much to say to me. And I left. I called my manager and I said, well, I messed up again. I dressed for the part. And anyway, a few weeks go by and I finally get hold of the script and I tell my manager, you got to send me back in for this. This is a great script. Mm-hmm. And she said, well, once they see you and they, you don't get a call back, they don't want to see you again. Mm-hmm. I said, I begged her, please just try. And she did, and she succeeded. And I finally went back into the same little office and met George like I never met him before. I pretended I hadn't been there before. And he didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything. And then the next thing I know, I got a call to try out for the movie. And it happened. The tryouts happened at a place called Dove Film, which was Haskell Wexler's commercial shooting studio, and it was a big space. He was very successful, and I got there, and there must have been 200 actors all trying out for different parts. So it was kind of a tense situation. Finally, my name is called, and I have this little scene memorized the scene where Toad's picking me up.
Oh, okay.
And so I go in to this alcove, and there's George, and there's Haskell, and George has this cheap little video camera, and what I remember is being kind of pink plastic. I don't know if that's true, but I just remember this pink plastic video camera that he has. And there's Charles Martin Smith, and there's a park bench that's supposed to double as the car. And I meet Charlie, and he's really short. And I think, I'm not going to get this because he's so much shorter than I am, and I kind of tower over him. Mm-hmm. And it's just going to look odd in film, for the female actress to be so much taller than the male actor. Yeah. And so I just basically gave up and just kind of did the lines, and I knew I wasn't going to get it because of the height difference. And lo and behold, I got it.
Oh, yeah.
And they must have thought the height difference was funny. I don't know, but and it was. It looked great on film.
It does. I was going to say it's noticeable in each scene.
And then Charlie and I, it's time to shoot, and Charlie and I wanted to bring my car up, my Volkswagen, and so Charlie and I were going to drive up. We took off about 4 a.m. from L.A. Car broke down in Santa Barbara, which is not that far away, and on a Sunday, and I had to I found someone to rebuild the engine or whatever happened.
Wow.
To it, I just had to take it at face value to get us back going on the road. And we left at about 4 a.m, finally get up to San Francisco about midnight. And they said, oh, you're here. Well, you got to try on wardrobe. Hurry.
That's right.
So next thing I know, we're like trying on clothes in the middle of the night. And I tried on that blue and white striped dress, and it fit perfectly with no alterations. And I said, this is it. This works.
Yeah.
Now can we go to bed? And that's how it all started. And tried on shoes, and they had those little Capizio shoes that were really, used, and someone else's shoes that they found at the secondhand store, and that spaghetti strap dress was found at the secondhand store. It was all used clothing, and we just put it on. It worked. Luckily I thought ahead enough to get that sweater.
Right.
Because when we shot the film, it was always very cold and foggy up in the Bay Area. Okay. And that sweater really saved me. In between takes, I would put my arms through the sleeves and, try to get warm.
Right. But not act cold whenever you are on camera. So.
No, and we had to try to make it look like it's the middle of summer, and be when they shot, have our arms relaxed and everything. But when they say cut, you're like, oh God, it's freezing. But it was quite the challenge.
Well,
no sleep, working all night, cold,
Sure. Tired.
Inadequate wardrobe,
Sitting on the
no
curb.
place to sit.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to congratulate you. Maybe those that have seen the movie may not know or realize that you did receive a nomination, Academy Award nomination, for Best Supporting Actress as Debbie Dunham. And so that's...
Well, it pays to advertise, and, they always say it's a business. And I have always treated acting as a business. And so I ran my own campaign, which was, some people looked down, didn't approve of it, but I thought, and no one else was running a campaign, and, Universal wasn't trying for any, Academy Awards, so I thought, well, I'll take it into my own hands. I spent between the Hollywood Reporter and the Variety a couple of $1,000s of money I really didn't have, but it paid off. And I'd run quarter-page ads, and back then it wasn't as competitive. The trying out for Academy Awards wasn't as competitive. Now, when the studios are going, it's like, they spend thousands of dollars now. But back then, it was a little more homespun in Hollywood, and, you dressed yourself for the Academy Awards. Now you have designers, wanting you to wear their stuff for free and the jewelry and all of that. But back then, you had to dress yourself for the awards, do your own hair. So it was kind of a little more interesting because you would see people's fashion taste and it was. I knew I wasn't going to win. I thought for sure that Sylvia Sidney was going to win for this film called Summer Wishes, Winter Dreams, because I felt that the Academy would give her the sentimental vote. And lo and behold, Tatum O'Neal for Paper Moon took it, and the rest is history.
Well, at least you got onto the recognition side of things.
Yeah, I got on TV, and my mama took a snapshot of me and the other actresses. Her timing was perfect, and she took a picture of me in the little boxes. How they do.
They do, yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Well, so that was neat.
Let's maybe shift gears for a second. I know that I own both, the original and the sequel, more American Graffiti. They're different. I mean, they're similar in the sense that a lot of the cast members carry forward and what have you, but they're also very different films cinematically and just the storyline and everything else. Any reflections that you have?
Well, I'm the one kind of pitched this to George. I said, when are we going to do a sequel? And, and so he thought about it, and he did it. Back then, sequels were not as prominent. It was kind of like, you do an original and then you move on. But now sequels are, dime a dozen.
Yeah, sure.
But it was completely different format. Most people did not like the sequel because they went in expecting it to kind of pick up the next night of the original. And the further adventures of Toad and Debbie and stuff like that. But it got a lot more serious.
Yes, it did.
And what was unique about it was taking place, and it was a little hard to follow because it was taking place in 4 different years at New Year's Eve. Okay. That was the common thread. New Year's Eve, but 4 different years. So, I think that was the common thread. It might have been New Year's Eve, but 4 different situations. We're following Cindy and Ronnie. Their marriage is on the rocks.
Yeah.
They get caught up in a demonstration of the public, and then it takes place with Toad. He's gone to Vietnam. And he's assigned latrine duty, and then it follows, who else? It follows me. I'm now in Haight-Ashbury, and
like a flower
working
power.
as a exotic dancer or something.
Yeah.
And the boss wants me to dance with a snake, and my boyfriend Lance winds up cheating on me, and I discover it. But I quickly get a new boyfriend, and then what's the other? Joe the Pharaoh winds up in Vietnam with Toad, and Big John Milner winds up at a racetrack.
Yeah,
he's racing high performance racing cars.
Yeah. Yep, he has that rail job.
And so,
dragster. Yeah.
Yeah, and so everyone has these different lives that all separated and went off in different directions, and the audience really wanted to see more of the same. And, you know, it had a lot more charm, the first one.
Sure.
The second one got way serious.
That's a good way to say it. It did. Well, it was just, it was set in a different time.
It has great music, though, and I think a lot of people, if they just give it a chance and watch it as a separate film, I don't know, maybe they would enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just kind of reframing expectations, and that might help with it. Well,
yes.
Well, I have had a lot of fun. I want to give you final say, or just kind of any new. I mean, you were in Blue Thunder, which was another one of my favorite movies and things. But you've had a whole catalog of work. Is there anything that you wanted to share about American Graffiti, or about recent or current projects? I'll give you the final say.
Well, as you know, we're in lockdown, so there are no current projects. But I've been in a lot of films that I'm very proud of. One, especially with David Bowie, called The Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yes.
For, like you said, Blue Thunder, more American Graffiti, The Big Sleep with Robert Mitchum. I've worked with a lot of great people. I worked with John Huston. My first film was a film called Fat City with Jeff Bridges, Stacy Keach, Susan Terrell. So I'm very satisfied. You know, I for coming, you know, from Fort Worth, Texas, and winding up in Hollywood with no real plan. You know, this was not planned out. It was just kind of taking life as it came, and you know, it's just been a lot of fun. And even this lockdown that we're in right now isn't really that bad. I've been straightening out closets and working jigsaw puzzles and talking to you. So who knows how far it's going to go, but we just take it one day at a time and move forward.
It really has, in a way, honed us being a little more patient. For at least for me, I feel like I have to just slow things down a little bit.
Exactly.
You can't plan
and
out the
get
next
your
day.
satisfaction from cleaning out the knife and fork drawer. You know, just, hey, that was satisfying. You know, you get your entertainment from other things. So, like gardening or pulling weeds or doing the dishes, petting the cat. You know, it's just, you can get a lot of satisfaction from those things if you just slow it down, like you say.
Yeah, that's what it takes.
And bring down the expectations and
and
develop more patience, like you say. You said that, and it's true.
Yep, for sure. Well, I sincerely appreciate you coming on, and we've got fans all over the U.S., in fact, 48 states and 44 countries, and I think just the fact there's a lot of mystique. We talked to folks that, of course, have tried to recreate the drives across Route 66 and the open road and the nostalgia of cruising and the drive-in theaters and the Mel's Diner type of situation things. And I particularly think those that maybe didn't grow up in that time, or even our friends all over the globe that know of this through the silver screen, I think you really gave us a great understanding of what it was like to be part of an iconic film that will probably always stand the test of time with anyone that has any love of Americana or great classic cars.
That's true. And our film, American Graffiti, is in the best 100 films of all time.
That's amazing.
And that is a great honor because, they do, of all time, 100 films were picked, and we're part of that list. So I'm very proud of the film.
For sure. Well, Candy, great to have you be part of the Cars of Carlisle crew. And
it was fun, and you asked great questions, and thank you for loving it. Thanks for watching it, and I thank all the listeners out there for loving the film and telling their friends about it. And there's so many people that watch it over. Sure. Here's a story. I was at a Moon Eye show, and it was at the end of the day, and I was signing pictures. And so a man comes up with a bit of an entourage, and he's like looking at my pictures, and he says, so how much are the pictures? And I say, well, $10 for black and white, $15 for color, blah, blah. Anyway, so he says, okay, I'll take that $10 one. And so I said, okay, who do you want to make it out to? And he said, okay, Jeff Beck.
Oh.
And I stop.
Oh, wow.
And I go, the Jeff Beck?
Right.
And he said, yeah. And I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, it turned out he told me how much he loved the film, and he had seen it 3,000 times. He admitted to this. 3,000 times.
Wow.
He recreated the car. He has a yellow hot rod.
Wow.
He loves the film. So he wanted a picture of he and I together, and I still have this picture on my cell phone. And he was trembling.
Wow.
Meeting one of his favorite characters. He was shaking. And I said to him, this should be the other way around. I should be trembling meeting you. But it was and he and I have remained friends, and I've been to his shows, comped, brought backstage,
Sure.
It's just you just never know who this film influences and who loves this film. Like Ray Everham and Jeff Beck. There's so many people that you just don't know that are out there that love American Graffiti.
That is impressive.
I know. I was like, Jeff Beck? And he did have a British accent. I'm like,
oh my God.
And it was him.
That is so cool. Well,
it was very cool.
I can't think of a neat, real fun way to end the interview. And
I know.
Wow, now I am just...
All right, honey.
Thank you so very, very much.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, and thank you, listeners. Yay!
We are back to Studio A in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Thank you so much to Candy. We so appreciate all the time you invested with us, and what a great interview. I loved learning more and more about one movie that I've been watching for years. I essentially grew up on it. My parents are big fans of it. I know that in those family vacations, in the back of the wagon, hearing the soundtrack, I pretty much know, I could quote most every line in the movie, know the music inside and out, and to learn more about one of my favorite movies meant a lot. So thank you for talking to all of the fans of Cars of Carlisle and giving them this experience. So it's time for that trivia question answer. That question at the beginning of the show was simply, what engine and transmission were in the 55 Chevy in American Graffiti? And the answer is, well, it's relatively straightforward, but as you know, with any movie car situation, there are multiple cars, some used for stunt. They have a main car or multiple main cars. There was, I believe, a 55 that was used for the wreck scene. But for the most part, looks like sources are commonly agreeing that one of the main cars was equipped with a 427 crate motor, an M22 Muncie, which, as you know, is relatively bulletproof, with a 488 Olds rear end in it, and fiberglass all around. So doors, trunk lid, fiberglass front end, along with the straight axle front suspension. Pretty much, like I said earlier, an all business machine. And boy, I would love to have a tribute car. That is such a great vehicle. But I digress. Anyhow, I just keep going back to that sound of the big block in the movie. It's definitely worth rewinding and playing several different times. And through surround sound, even better. Before we go, I want to again say thank you so much to all of you for supporting the Cars of Carlisle podcast. You do that each and every week by coming back and listening, by subscribing, by sharing with your car buddies, friends, and family, rating and reviewing on iTunes. I truly appreciate that. And I certainly want to say again, while closing, a big East Coast thank you to Candy Clark for giving such an incredible interview and being a friend to this show. May you all stay safe until you come back to join us next week for yet another fun road trip. In the meantime, drive well, be well, and take care.